the Faceless Man. In a desolate town, where the sun rarely pierced the thick clouds, rumors swirled about a figure known only as the Faceless Man. He was said to wander the outskirts, a spectral presence whose visage had been stolen by his own obsessions. Thomas Reed was a quiet man living on the fringes of society. His life revolved around his work as a sculptor, but his art had a sinister edge. He was obsessed with the human form, particularly faces. Night after night, he locked himself in his dimly lit studio, feverishly carving marble, seeking perfection in his creations. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more than to create beauty. He longed to possess it. One stormy evening, while digging through a pile of old newspapers, Thomas stumbled upon an article about an occult ritual that promised the power to manifest one's deepest desires. The catch? A soul must be sacrificed to grant the wish. Driven by desperation, Thomas gathered the necessary ingredients, lured by the allure of creating the perfect face, his own masterpiece. The night of the ritual, the winds howled like banshees outside. Thomas lit candles in a pentagram and recited the incantations. As he reached the climax, a shadow slithered through the room, a presence that chilled him to the bone. The candles flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if his heart were being pulled from within. Thomas gasped, falling to his knees, the world blurring around him. When he regained his senses, he looked into a cracked mirror hanging on the wall. He recoiled in horror. His face was gone. Where his features once were, there was nothing but smooth, pale skin, reflecting the dim candlelight. In a frenzy, he rushed outside, clutching at his head, crying out for help. But the townsfolk had long grown weary of the odd happenings surrounding Thomas. They shut their doors, whispering tales of the man who had gone mad. Days turned into weeks, and Thomas wandered the streets, a hollow shell of his former self. He learned to navigate life without a face, using a hood to conceal his features. But as the days passed, he became more of a shadow, haunting the edges of town, his existence fading into myth. One evening, he heard whispers from a group of teenagers gathered near an abandoned house. They spoke of the Faceless Man, a monster who preyed on the souls of the curious. Fueled by rage and despair, Thomas approached, the darkness in his heart urging him forward. "Please help me," he cried, his voice raspy and hollow. The teenagers screamed, their laughter turning to terror as they caught sight of him. They ran, but one girl stumbled, falling to the ground. Thomas, driven by an inexplicable hunger, lunged at her, desperate for connection, for recognition. But as his hands reached out, she screamed louder, a sound that echoed in the stillness. In that moment, something twisted inside him, a transformation fueled by anguish and longing. The girl's fear twisted his heart further, and he realized he could not just take a face. He needed to become one. Over the weeks that followed, Thomas became a specter of dread in the town. The Faceless Man was not just a tale to scare children. He became the embodiment of lost identity and twisted desires. He learned to craft faces from the memories of those he had touched, faces that haunted their dreams, stolen from the depths of their fears. Those who met him in the dark of night spoke of an unsettling emptiness where a face should be, leaving them gasping for breath, feeling the void seep into their souls. Years passed, and the townsfolk whispered warnings of the Faceless Man, an entity born from obsession and sorrow. Yet those who dared to venture too close to the woods at night sometimes swore they saw a figure with no face standing among the trees, waiting, watching, forever longing for what he could never have. And so, the legend of the Faceless Man grew, a twisted reminder that some desires come at a horrific cost, and in the end, there are fates worse than death.